Um, I got a call one day, sort of out of the blue, from a friend of mine who was a wrestling magazine editor, photographer, and all that stuff in New York City. His name was Bill Apter, and Bill told me, he said, Jerry, I'm friends with Andy Kaufman. I said, yeah, the guy on Taxi. He said, yeah, and I said, where do you know Andy Kaufman from? And he said, well, I live in Long Island, and Andy lives there, and I've known him for several years. And he said he was at the wrestling show the other night at one of Vince McMahon Senior's wrestling shows, and he said, I don't know if you've seen any of it, but he's been wrestling women in his nightclub act and on Merv Griffin and on different shows and that sort of thing. I said, yeah, I've seen that. And he said, well, I was at the show last night, and Andy was there, and he approached Vince McMahon Sr. and told him that he would like to try wrestling women at a wrestling show. He said, I've been doing it on TV shows and in nightclubs and that sort of thing, and it hadn't been well received, and he said, I just wanted to try it in front of wrestling fans. And apparently, Vince McMahon Sr. told Andy, he said, well, Andy, and of course at the time they were trying, everybody was so protective of the wrestling business, they didn't want anybody to think it wasn't real, and so he told Andy, he said, I'm just hesitant to involve a Hollywood actor with my wrestlers, because he said, it might make the fans think we're all acting. And so he kind of gave Andy the brush off and turned him down, and so Bill called me and said, is it all right if I give Andy your number, because I told Andy, hey, I know Jerry Lawler down in Memphis, Tennessee, and they have a wrestling company that do shows at the Mid-South Coliseum every single week, and he said, I think he would be interested in having you come down and do it. And I said, well, at first I thought he was joking. I said, yeah, right, sure, Andy Kaufman. But anyway, I said, yeah, that'd be great. So the next day I got a phone call from Andy Kaufman, and he just re-explained what I just said. He said, I just want a chance to wrestle women in front of wrestling fans. So I said, sure, come on down. We set the date, and at the time when it all started, that's all Andy wanted to do. I mean, he just wanted to come, and he said, I just do it completely legit. He said, I choose, or let the crowd choose women out of the audience, and get in the ring and wrestle them. So that's what we did. Andy came down. We had but before the great thing, before he showed up, he sent down a lot of some clips and some interviews that he made out in Hollywood.
Like all that soap stuff and the toilet paper stuff was done. Because wrestling shows, you'd send the clips back and forth.
Exactly.
There's a great documentary called "I'm from Hollywood" that shows all those things, the original Andy Kaufman clips and the original.
Exactly. And so mainly he started off insulting women and insulting the South. So when Andy got here the first time, the people hated him. At least the wrestling fans hated him. And so he went into the ring, and we had a complete sellout at the Mid-South Coliseum held 11,000 people for a sellout, and we had wrestling shows there every single Monday night, and so we were always looking at, we were tickled to death if we ever had a sellout, but we'd draw 8,000-9,000 people, but when Andy came, sold out, people trying to get in, turn people away, and it was great. I mean, he did exactly what he said. He went in the ring, challenged some women, but there were 8 or 10 women that came, that wanted to wrestle. I think he picked out 3 different women. They all had 5 minutes with Andy, and he just went in there and wrestled. I mean, you could just tell this guy is just having fun, and it was all like you saw in the movie there. It was basically just fun for himself. I mean, that's the whole thing he was doing. He was just enjoying himself. So he wrestled each one of the women, and he pinned each one of them. And so after it was over, I mean, it was like, that's it. I've done what I wanted to do. I've accomplished it. But Jerry Jarrett, who was my business partner, and I were sitting there thinking, man, this was awesome. 11,000 people here tonight. And so we both went into Andy, and we said, Andy, this was awesome. Would you want to come back and do it again? And man, his eyes lit up, and he said, yeah, I would love to come back. And so we set another date a few weeks apart, a few weeks down the road. Andy came back again. We did the exact same thing again. We had 3 women out of the audience, and it was just another sellout. And the great thing about this one was there really was a Foxy, but I think her name was Foxy Brown instead of Foxy Jackson. But anyway, the third woman that he chose, and the third woman that got in the ring in wrestling, and he really, the first two he just kind of dominated, you know, and he never let them have the upper hand at all. And then the third one was this this young black lady that was named Foxy Brown, and she got into the ring on the third match with Andy, and when the bell rang, just like in the movie, she ran across the ring, grabbed Andy, picked him up in the air, just like the body slammed him down. The most realistic thing was where Andy and Jim Carrey in the movie was trying to get out of the ring, and she was pulling his pants off him. And she just manhandled Andy, and the crowd was going crazy. I mean, this was the first time they'd seen Andy getting his comeuppance, and so then finally, I really think after being in that situation a lot of times myself, I think she all of a sudden somewhere in there she just got winded. She maybe looked around and realized where she was and what she was doing, and suddenly got nervous or whatever. But anyway, the tables turned. Andy got the best of her, got her down and pinned her before the 5 minutes was up. And so it was a great night. We go back in the back, and I went into Andy and I said, listen, this things like this just don't ordinarily happen. We have to kind of make it happen. But this is like a rematch thrown right in our lap. I said, Andy, if you could come back again, I could take this girl, Foxy Brown, and I'll go on television with her, and I'll tell the people that I'm going to teach her one or two holds and kind of coach her and be her mentor. And if you come back, we'll promise a victory over you, and I think we'll do another sellout. Andy was tickled to death. We come back again a couple weeks later. That's exactly what happened.
The amazing thing was Andy sort of like put his whole career on hold and was flying to Memphis like every single week.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the funny thing. A lot of people think that
with his own money, he was just coming back to Memphis.
Right. And a lot of people think that that Andy and I or that Andy only had the one wrestling match. Right. That wasn't the case either.
It went on forever.
Oh, it went on for like a year. Andy was enjoying himself, and we were enjoying the sellouts every week, so it was awesome. But anyway, he finally we did the rematch with Foxy, and it's just one of those situations where I didn't really tell her any moves to do or anything like that, but I was in her corner. And the week before on Saturday morning television, this was another thing that just happened. The week before that Saturday morning on television, we go out to do an interview. And Andy said in an interview saying, I'm so confident that I will beat Foxy Brown, even with the great Jerry Lawler in her corner, that if she beats me, I will give her $5,000 plus I will marry her right in the middle of the ring at the Mid-South Coliseum. That's what Andy said on the television interview. And so I'm out there with Foxy Brown, and it was so awesome. I just handed her the microphone, and she said, well, I'll tell you this, I could sure use the $5,000 because my house just burned down this weekend. And so she said, I lost everything. But I wouldn't marry Andy Kaufman if he were the last man on earth. So she said, but I'm still going to beat him. So anyway, that's the way that we had the match. And all of this stuff, a lot of people think was planned, but it really actually just happened. It was like the thing on Fridays where you just witnessed the happening. These things just fell into place as we had the match with Foxy. I'm there in her corner. Andy and there was nothing pre-planned about those matches. That was not set up or anything. Andy just went in there, wrestled the girls, and so he had the match with Foxy with the $5,000 at stake and the marriage at stake. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, Foxy just got winded. Andy got the best of her, held her shoulders down, pinned her 1, 2, 3, and then he was so proud of himself, he did sort of like in the movie, he just started rubbing her face in the match. She turned over and trying to get him, and Randy's like rubbing her face. And now I'm sitting in the corner over there, and there's 11,000 people looking at me saying, hey, Jerry, why don't you go in there and help your protege, right? So, the people start chanting, Jerry, Jerry. So I get up out of the corner. I literally go in the ring. I pick Andy up and just kind of toss him over to the side. And I mean, the rest is just like it's on the movie. Andy jumps up and looks at me, and he's just like, "You can't touch me. You're a professional wrestler. You can't put your hands on me. I'm from Hollywood. I'm an actor. I will sue you. I will sue everybody. I'll sue this whole state." And so it went from there. We get back to the back in the dressing room, and you know, Andy is just like irate out there. And I get back to the locker room, and he comes in and he goes, "How was that?" And I said, "That was great, Andy. It was awesome." And now at this time, I'm thinking selfishly of the way that I need to see if I can get some sort of rub off this Hollywood star for myself before he goes back to California, right? So then I told him, I said, "Andy, this is the point that you have taken this as far as you can go with wrestling women." And I said, "Now you need to have a match with a man." And he said, "No, I can't do that." I said, "Yes, you can. You need to have a match with me, and I can assure you, you won't get hurt. Nothing will happen, but it'll be this. You think this was a sell? I mean, you know, this will be something that'll be talked about everywhere." And that's how the match came about. And you know, it went down where I knew that he couldn't go in and put on an entertaining match, so that's why the match consisted of 2 moves. I gave him the suplex, the back suplex, and then a couple of pile drivers. And and to satisfy Andy, you know, I told him beforehand. I said, "You'll even get to win the match." And he went, "What? I'll get to win?" And I said, "Yes. I'll get disqualified when I give you this neck-breaking pile driver." And so he went, "Oh, okay, but it won't really break my neck, will it?" And I said, "No." So anyway, that's how all that happened. Just happened.
And here's the thing: this is before social media. This is before all of that. And like, I'm just a kid in the Midwest, and this is going down. And it was everywhere. This man broke Andy Kaufman's neck. It was on every newscast. It was in the newspapers, and it became this whole crazy thing where, like, that was the whole thing about Kaufman, is you never quite knew whether it was real. I think his wrestling stuff is the most amazing stuff, because wrestling's one of those things that everyone always suspects is fake. But for some reason, when Andy Kaufman did it, they said, "Oh my God, no, this is real. It really is." 2 fakes together made it absolutely positively real.
Well, the cool thing, he did tell me when I gave him the pile driver in the match. To me, the funniest story that came out of this, I told Andy I'm going to do a back suplex. I said, "Just keep your chin tucked, and you know, you won't land on the back of your head." Of course, I guess he forgot that, because he said he did land on the back of his head. If you saw the move that I gave to Jim Carrey there, when Andy said he'd land on the back of his head, he said, "I was knocked out for probably 30 seconds. He said, "I didn't even know the pile driver was happening." But he did. He said, "It did hit my head." And I said, "But it didn't hurt, right?" He said, "A little bit." But anyway, so anyway.
What a show off. Lawler, you know, man, there's a new king in town. I challenge you at the stroke of midnight tonight. You're not the mayor here. I know. You lost that campaign.
Tony Clifton is letting himself go.
All right.
Are you okay?
We're gonna sue him.
Yes, sue him.
I think we're going to finance the entire Indie Memphis 20th edition.
Well, another quick thing about the, whatever, in a movie you have to condense everything, but like the fact that Andy was coming here every single weekend for forever, he played the broken neck thing forever. I mean, like, literally, he wore this neck brace every public appearance for like the next 5 months or something, and apparently like the neck brace, he never cleaned it. It was smelly, it was horrible, and all the people around him were like, "Get rid of that thing," but he refused to admit that his neck wasn't broken, and it led to Letterman, which was just.
Well, I mean, yeah, it did lead to Letterman, but the way the neck brace came about was when all they had told Andy was, give you a couple pile drivers, I'll get disqualified, and you'll win the match, and they'll help you back to the dressing room when the match is over. So all went well. Gave him the suplex, in which he said knocked him out for a little bit. Gave him the 2 pile drivers. I was disqualified, and he was left laying in the ring, and 11,000 people were cheering like crazy, and I'm waving, cheering, all this stuff, and the referee's raising my hand, and so a few minutes went by, and finally the crowd is kind of dying down, and so I told, and Andy's still laying out there, right? He's not moving. So I tell the referee, who's my good friend Jerry Calhoun, I said, hey. I said, okay, go over and tell Andy to, help him back to the dressing room. Hey. So Jerry Calhoun goes over and he kneels down and he says something to him. And he comes back to me and he says, and I said, yeah. He says, Andy says he wants an ambulance. Okay. I said, what? He said he wants an ambulance. I said, he's not hurt, is he? He said, I don't know. He just said he wants an ambulance. I said, okay, all right. And I said, now, this like I said, this is an 81 or 82 or something like that. Anyway, and we were kind of tightwads, and when it came to being promoters, we weren't known for spending a lot of money here in Memphis. And we had done things before where somebody had to be carried out in an ambulance, and it cost like, I don't know, $250 or something like that. And so that's all I'm thinking in my head. So I told Kevin, I said, now tell him we'll just get some people from the back to help him back to the dressing room. So Calhoun goes back over, kneels down, and I'm still waving to the people, shaking hands with everybody. Calhoun goes back over to me and he says, no, he wants an ambulance. Damn it. I said, no, tell him an ambulance costs $250 and just help him up and we'll get him out of here. So I'm still waving. Calhoun goes back over again. Andy's lifeless, talking to him. He comes back to me and he says he'll pay for the ambulance. I said, okay, call an ambulance for the guy, right? So literally, they come out, the ambulance picks him up, they take him to St. Francis Hospital. He stays in traction in the hospital for 3 days. With his neck in traction, his wires pulling on. That's how much Andy Kaufman, that's the lengths that Andy Kaufman would go to make whatever he was doing seem real. And the part about his parents, he told me at one time, he said, I use my parents as a barometer. He said, because they think that everything I do is some sort of scam. He said, so if I can ever fool them, I know I fooled everybody. And that's what happened. When we did the screening of the movie in 2000, I met Andy's parents for the first time, and his father came and told me, he said, Jerry, we hated you for years because we thought you tried to break our son's neck. And he said he never told us. And Andy would never crack to anybody. He didn't. That was just the way he was.
I'm running this Q&A but tell me what it was like. It's fascinating. I make all these movies about real people, but to be the real person playing himself 20 years after you did that. What was it like when you became a part of this film and having to recreate all the things that you'd done earlier? How did that mess with your head?
Well, I mean, it really didn't. It was fun, actually. And one of the cool things, as you know, about this movie is almost everybody that was in Andy's life was in this movie, right, in one way or other. Either they're playing themselves. So you saw all the cast of Taxi, with the exception of Danny DeVito, was playing. Danny DeVito was playing George Shapiro, who was Andy's manager. But George Shapiro was in the movie as well. George Shapiro, the real George Shapiro,
was show business.
Yeah, that was the real George Shapiro. And oh my gosh, just almost everybody played themselves. But the funny thing was, when I first heard about the movie, somebody, I don't even know how, but somebody told me, hey, they're making a movie about Andy Kaufman, and they got this guy who's called Disco Inferno. He said they got this guy named Disco Inferno that's playing you. And I said, what? So anyway, I have a friend of mine gets in touch with Milos Forman and what's the
Francie Mailer?
No, I'll never think of it. But anyway, Michael Houseman. Yeah, Michael Houseman. So anyway,
who played Santa Claus in the film?
Yes, he did. So all these people. So anyway, my friend got in touch with them and said, hey, how about having Jerry Lawler play himself? And I guess they thought, like 20 years later or something, that I wouldn't be in shape or something. Anyway, I literally had to audition to be myself, which is kind of weird. So I had to meet with Milos Forman and Michael Houseman and to get the part. But yeah, it was fun. It was cool. The only weird thing about it was Jim Carrey.
Correct.
Jim Carrey,
Jim Carrey basically was so committed to the part and wanted the movie and the set to be a Kaufman-like experience. So you were not allowed. He was always in character.
Yeah.
Like he was always either Andy Kaufman on a day that he was playing Andy Kaufman or Latka. It was a completely pleasant experience, and he was you know, but you could never address him as Jim. You had to address him as Andy. But when he's playing Tony Clifton, it was a complete nightmare. It was that taxi sequence where he would show up hours late. He would you know, lock Danny DeVito in his trailer, and it was a complete mess. But so like when you know, a lot of people said when they worked on the movie, they never met Jim Carrey. They only met one of these other people, and I know that they fucked with you quite a bit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he did. You're right. I mean, that was the very first day on the set. I'm come walking in. I had my wife with me at the time. Come walking in. Here's Universal Studios. Just I'm looking at all these things, and all of a sudden, bam! Right in front of us, a big glass bottle burst, like a bottle of Gatorade, hits the ground, burst and splashed all over my wife's dress and all over me, and I'm like, what has happened? And I look over, and here's Jim Carrey over, like leaning out of a door. He's just thrown this bottle of Gatorade as he said, "Lawler, I'll get you, Lawler. I promise you I'll get you before this is over." That was my first experience with Jim Carrey on the movie, and believe it or not, it really went downhill from there because he was like so into this. He claimed that he was channeling Andy Kaufman to play this part, and as you said, Larry, everybody had to refer to him as Andy Kaufman. Even Milos Forman. I mean, Milos Forman directed One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Amadeus, I mean, all of these movies, and he's one of the most respected directors ever. Even he had to call Jim Carrey Andy, or he wouldn't respond to him. So it was weird. And then at one point in the filming, I had to go to Milos and said, has Jim Carrey even read the script? But does he not realize that Andy and I didn't hate each other? I mean, that we weren't mortal enemies? And he said, "Oh, Jerry, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it was bad. Yeah, he threw eggs. He threw eggs at me. The Gatorade. One day I did a whole scene, and I come back to my dressing room, and my wife said, "You see what's on your back?" And what? And he'd come to me and said, "It's all right, we'll be friends." And he'd take the sign that said Hulk Hogan wannabe on my back. I'm trying to film this whole scene with that on there. So he's just like, he did a lot of stupid things. But the one thing, the stupidest thing that he did was forget that the last scene that we were going to shoot was the slap scene on the David Letterman show. So I got the last laugh. I promise you, I slapped Jim Carrey twice as hard as I slapped Andy Kaufman.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
I have a two-part question. Most of it's just rumor. King, I heard that Jim Carrey sent you something after the filming was done or something like that. And then second part was it true that Letterman was not even really in on it when it really happened with Kaufman?
Yeah, the answer to both those questions is yes. And this was like all from Jim Carrey's secretary, Hollywood. And she said, "Jerry, this is told me her name and said, I'm Jim Carrey's secretary, and I was calling to get your address. Jim wants to send you something." And I said, okay. What is it? And she said, "No, I can't tell you. It's a surprise." And so I give her my address, and a couple of days later, I get this box, and I start opening it up, and there's a letter. And this was the part I never really understood. I didn't get this, but it started out as, man, I should have brought that. I still have it. After the rest of it. Then I could have read it. But it started out as it said, "Jerry, working with you was like, I don't know, I think he used the word odyssey or something, but anyway, it was a kind of a backhanded compliment. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was like saying it was not great, but an real experience, right?" So he said, the gift of the costume that you wore in the movie is one of the best gifts I've ever received. So apparently, if you saw the big costume that when I came out to do the wrestling, the big robe and that outfit and everything, apparently somebody had given that to Jim Carrey, and he thought it was for me. But I didn't get to keep that outfit. I never saw it again after the filming. But he said, thank you for it's one of the greatest gifts that I've ever received. And he said, I know that you are into music. And so he said, I was going through my personal album collection, and he said, I just wanted to send you these as a token of my appreciation. And it was like 10 record albums, all done by wrestlers. There's like and they went way back. I mean, some of them were from the 60s and everything, like Antonio Rocca had a picture of this guy doing a drop kick wearing no shoes on the front, and his Antonio Rocca sings whatever, and then the Hulk Hogan WWE record album, one by a wrestler named Sweet Daddy Siki. But anyway, it's like 10 different wrestling albums in this box. And so I just, that's like weird, but I guess he thought that I would really appreciate it. And then he also said in there, he said, hey, I have a box or a suite at the Staples Center. If you're ever in Los Angeles and want to go to a game, I'd love to have you as my guest. But he didn't include any way to get back in touch with him. So I've never been able to call in that favor since that time. But the thing about the Letterman deal was, nobody was in on it. And the honest to God truth of the matter is, that was another one of those things that just happened. It was never meant. Andy and I never sat down and said, hey, let's do this. The truth of the matter was that morning, they had a production meeting. They tape Letterman at like 5:30 in the afternoon, but they call you in at like 10 o'clock in the morning. They have a production meeting. A segment coordinator is there, and he goes over what you're going to do. You don't see David or anything like that. You just go in, you meet with this guy, and he said, and first of all, the cool thing was Andy wouldn't agree to be anywhere around me, so we had to have these meetings separate. So I go in, and the guy says, here's what we're going to do. You and Andy are going to be on for 2 segments. He said the first segment, Dave is going to show the clips that Andy sent making fun of you and making fun of Memphis and making fun of women and all that stuff. And he said, then we're going to show you the clip of you giving Andy the pile driver. And we'd like for you guys to be a little antagonistic towards each other in the first segment. Not too much, but a little bit. He said, then Dave's going to take a break. We'll come back in the second segment. Andy will apologize to you for making fun of wrestling. Then you apologize to Andy for giving him the pile driver and hurting his neck. And then Andy is going to get up and sing, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. So I said, okay, that'll be funny, I guess. So I go back to my room and get ready for them to come and pick me up later on to do the taping. And the phone rings, and it's Andy Kaufman. And he says, well, did they tell you what they want us to do? And I said, yeah. And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, here's selfish me always thinking, because as you said, at this time, this is 6 months later, Andy and I are still selling out the Mid-South Coliseum almost every Monday night. I mean, we went from wrestling each other, then wrestling in tag teams, him trying to he put out a $5,000 bounty, and he started bringing in wrestlers to wrestle against me with him in their corner. Jesse the Body Ventura, who was later the governor of Minnesota, comes in, and all of these things were just going on week after week, continuing our feud. And so he said, well, what do you think? And I said, I think it'll be funny, but that's going to be the end of our feud. If you and I kiss and make up on network television, we're done down in Memphis. He said, yeah. He said, that's what I was thinking too. And he sat there a minute, and here's all he said. He said, man, wonder what would happen if you just hauled off and slugged me. And I said, well, Andy, I said, first of all, I'll get arrested. And I said, I can't afford to be arrested here in New York. I got a match tomorrow night that I got to be back in Memphis for. I said, I can't do that. And I said, second of all, it's on tape. They would never show that, if I were to slug you. And he said, yeah, probably right. That would be good, wouldn't it? And I swear to God, that's just the way it was left. We hung up. We didn't even see each other at the Rockefeller Center, because he stayed away from me. I was in the green room with all these other people, and then they called us out for the first segment. And so I go out there and sit down, and we saw basically what happened there. You know, they showed the clips, there were little antagonists, and I realized at the end of the segment why they said they wanted us to be a little antagonistic was because they had secretly hidden a wrestling bell underneath Dave's desk. And so Andy and I started sort of getting into it, and Dave goes, wait, and he reaches down and he kicks it with his foot, you know, and this bell starts ringing, and he said, we're gonna have to cool things off here a little bit, we're gonna take a break and we'll be back. So they went to the commercial break. Andy gets up out of the chair and walks, you know, over by the door over there, so just to appear that he didn't even want to be close to me. And so then we get ready, come back for the second segment. I just knew that Andy never really apologized to me, and I thought he was going to be supposed to be the first apology before I apologized to him. So the apologies never happened. It just kept going on, and Dave kind of fed into it a little bit, but then after a while, apparently our time had run out on the segment, and so I think Dave realized, well, this is not going like it's supposed to. You know, they haven't apologized, and Andy's not going to sing or whatever. So he just said, well, we'll take another break and, see where we go from here. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is it. This is our second break. We haven't done what we were supposed to do, and we're just going to be gone. You know, we got 2 segments, and that's it. So when they started playing the music, when Paul Schaefer's band started playing, I look back at it whenever I see it on the rerun or anything. It's like an out-of-body experience. It's like I'm watching somebody else. I don't even know what I was thinking at the time, but I literally just stood up and I looked at Andy, made good eye contact, and I think he realized what was coming. And I just hauled off and slapped the crap out of him, knocked him right out of his chair, over on, rolling on the floor and everything. And I remember the first thing I did was look over at Dave, and he was just staring straight ahead like this. He wouldn't look at me, he wouldn't look at Andy or anything. He's just like, he had some papers and he started looking down at these papers. And he said later, he said, that was the first time I ever knew that I'd lost complete control of my show. But anyway, the security guard came in and grabbed me and kind of hustled me back out to the green room. And all I could hear was just this huge commotion going on out in the studio. Andy was screaming and yelling, and I swear it was like there had been some kind of assassination or something. Everybody's going, oh my God, oh! And so, and when they taped the show, they really just only took a 2-minute break for the commercial break. But anyway, maybe like 15 minutes went by, and it kind of finally started quieting down to where I couldn't hear anything. The other funny thing was, when I left the green room, there were about 12 or 15 people still in just sitting in the green room. They were the other guests and their families and all this sort of stuff. When they brought me back to the green room, it was empty. There was like nobody in there. He said, you're bringing that guy back here? So I'm sitting in there by myself, and finally quiets down, and then all of a sudden, the door kind of peeks open a little bit there, and this young kid sticks his head in and said, Mr. Lawler, Dave wants to know if you want to come back out and sort of wrap things up. And now when he said that, I thought, oh, now they're gonna show this. If they're gonna have me come back out, they're gonna show the slap. So I said, yeah, I'll come back and do anything. So I go back out and I sit down, and it was all of a sudden the late night audience turned into a wrestling crowd. When I walk back through the audience, it's like boo, boo. It was just like a wrestling crowd. So I come back in and I sit down, and now Andy is over by the far door over there that had the exit sign over it and everything, and he's over there holding his head, and his brother Michael was there with him there, like checking him out and all this stuff. And so Dave looks over and he said, Andy, are you gonna come back in here? And the director's going, 10, 9, 8. He said, Andy, are you gonna come back in here? And Andy shouts out from the side. He said, no, if I do, I'll say words you can't use on TV. So Dave, it's like 3, 2, 1, Dave comes on and he says, well, the great line, he said, he took Tom Snyder's place, I guess, and he said, well, Jerry Lawler's here, and Andy Kaufman's here, and some nights I wish Tom were still here. But he said, that's not the case tonight, but we really thank you for being here, Jerry. And all of a sudden, here comes Andy. And he comes, and I'm sitting there, and Andy comes in over Dave's shoulder, and he starts slamming on Dave's desk, and this unbelievable tirade of obscenities. What you saw in the movie was not even an inkling of what was coming out of Andy's mouth. And that was the other thing. I think Andy was never known to be a guy that would get upset or certainly not swear or anything. But I mean, this was, this would have embarrassed a truck driver or a sailor or something like this. He starts screaming all of these obscenities, and now I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking, Jesus, Andy, what are you doing? They're obviously going to show the slap, or we wouldn't be back out here. But there's no way they're going to show this. So why you're killing the whole thing, right? So I tried with my body language. I'm just sitting there and I'm looking at him going, what are you doing? So he goes with all the cussing and swearing, and then he grabs I think they showed it was coffee, but I really believe it was just water. But he grabs the cup, and then he looks at me in the eyes, like, just like I did before I just slapped him. He looks at me and he goes, yeah, and throws the coffee or the water so they would miss me. And then I jump up again. He takes off. The security guard comes back and grabs me again, hustles me out, and the security guard takes me straight to an elevator, and he says, look, I want to get you out of the building because Kaufman's elevator don't go all the way to the top floor, and he's probably going to try to have you arrested. So let's get you downstairs and out of the building. So that was the last I saw or heard of anybody. And that was like at 6:30 in the afternoon. I go back to my hotel. I didn't hear a word from anybody. I'm thinking, what in the world is going to happen? I turned the TV on at 11:30, and well, you saw, there it was. They showed everything. They showed the slap. Then they come back and they showed Andy coming in with all the tirade. Except instead of the cursing, they bleeped it out and put in, instead of just putting in beeps, they put in like the sound of a cuckoo clock. So every time he was opening his mouth, he was going cuckoo, 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 and it made it hilarious, But then, as soon as that showed, the phone started ringing off the hook. It was like the New York Post, the New York Times, every kind of, it made like you said, like worldwide news. It was unbelievable, the response that I got.
I feel like this Q&A could last as long as they on the movie. But unfortunately, we're out of time. I just want to give these guys a round of applause. We have a number of great programs still left.